Welcome to Tannin with Experts. In this last episode, closing the series of Gumboro control videos, we are going to receive a really special guest, one of the reference of the poultry industry, Sjaak de Wit, directly from Netherlands. So, keep tuning with us and enjoy the video. So hello dear poultry industry friends, we are today in Utrecht, Netherlands, and I have a pleasure to receive in our Tannin with Experts one of the reference for the poultry industry. Sjaak de Wit is with us today, so welcome to Tannin with Experts.
Thank you.
So we are going to discuss with him a little bit about Gumboro control and him share with us his experience, his knowledge about that. To start our conversation, Sjaak, I would like to listen from you your point of view about the current status or the current situation of Gumboro disease around the world.
I guess we have more knowledge about the situation until 2020 or 2019 when COVID broke out. So due to the less traveling, I guess, we might have a little gap in the most recent developments, but I guess it won't have changed that much. Gumboro is present in many countries, not always very visible. That depends on which virus and for example, in the modern broilers, they show less clinical signs than, let's say, a layer. So, but whether it's Asia or Africa or Europe or the Americas, Gumboro virus, the presence, it's always something to consider.
And consider this change that, as you mentioned, that is not causing too many clinical signs anymore. What kind of impacts that you still see?
Well, the biggest risk for that is that people tend to underestimate the presence and the damage by immune suppression by this virus, because when you have a clear clinical outbreak, you will get the diagnosis because you have mortality, you do your postmortems, you see the bursae. Well, based on the bursae lesion, you might already conclude it's Gumboro. But okay, you do PCR, you get the virus, so you will not miss this disease. But when the virus is at an age or in partly vaccinated birds, or for example in the modern broiler, the clinical damage might be so low that people do not do the postmortems on the right time, so they don't see the acute phase of the infection. They only see the damage later on, but then you don't diagnose the underlying cause, immune suppression by Gumboro, anymore. So I see a worldwide tendency to underestimate the prevalence of Gumboro more and more.
Sjaak, as you are teacher of Utrecht University, but as well a senior researcher of GD Diameter, you have the opportunity to be in contact with different countries, different regions.
Yeah.
Do you see difference between countries when you're talking about the presence of the disease?
Oh, absolutely. It's, but let's say it usually goes in waves. We have many things that come and then people take more action, they are awake, they do more monitoring, then they get it under control. And I see differences. There are countries or regions where they have a kind of active monitoring. They are always doing a kind of surveys for, is the virus present, is the damage, and there are other regions where, okay, we see the disease, we take action, then results go back to normal, and then people relax and think, okay, it looks okay, therefore it is okay. They don't check. Yeah, and then after a few years later, you're getting back to the problem phase again. So, yeah, I see countries where they do this active monitoring to let's say, to prevent damage by Gumboro, and there are other regions where it's more, well, first has to be damaged, then we do something, and then, yeah, we go back to normal. Yes. And yeah, this, I guess, is a kind of, partly based on the mentality, the traditions, awareness of damage. Do you have the right figures? If you are, let's say, for an independent farmer, it's very difficult to see the damage by immune suppression. It's more difficult than for an integration, which has much more data, maybe also more knowledge. So there's quite a difference worldwide how people deal with this.
And regarding this Gumboro monitoring, how to do a proper diagnosis?
I guess the diagnosis is based on the real diagnosis. So, is it Gumboro? And if it's Gumboro, you also would like to know which strain is involved, because that's part of. For that, using PCR test is very convenient. If you are able to sample on the right time point, and that's with subclinical infections, that might be a challenge. On the other hand, don't forget serology, because if you have a well-vaccinated flock, but there might still be a low level of virus, you might not be able to detect it by PCR because you don't sample the right bird at the right time. But then serology still gives you the let's say the infection pressure at your farm or region. So for me, yeah, this combination of serology and PCR testing is a strong one.
You mentioned some techniques in the lab techniques to help on the diagnosis. What can we expect from the serology, from the PCR, from histopathology?
Let's say serology is very good in measuring antibody responses to vaccination. That's one. That's already, for me, an important part of what serology is very useful for, is to check whether your intention to vaccinate the flock, you expect that the flock will respond. If you make a mistake, or the hatchery makes a mistake, or the application in the field, you would like to, you would like to be able to check, did my birds respond to the vaccination program as I want them to do? So that's an important part. On the other part, the infection pressure, serology also gives you an idea whether there's a field infection as well. However, serology cannot tell you which strain is involved. Is it, well, you don't know. Serology just said there was Gumboro virus. Not always that clear, by the way, but let's say it gives you an impression about the infection pressure, but not which one. For that, you have to get the virus itself. Well, to be able to type the virus, to see if it's strain A, B, C, or D, a new strain, or the old strain, or the strain from another country, then you need really to look at the genetic information in that strain, a PCR with sequencing, and then you really know the identity of the virus, and that tells you, well, what's going on, the epidemiology, where it came from, do I have to adapt my vaccination program, etc. The histopathology in the end, this gives you an impression about the damage in the bursa. I find the interpretation of histopathology, it also depends on which kind of vaccine you use, in presence of MDA and maternal-derived antibodies or not. So the interpretation of histopathology is not that easy. For use of some vaccines, it might be even very difficult. It also changes in time. You're recent after vaccination or somewhat longer. So for me, the histopathology, it's on itself very valuable, but the interpretation on field conditions, you have to have a lot of knowledge. So I would not recommend it as a routine way of checking. I think it's not suitable for that purpose.
Considering that more and more we see what we call subclinical disease that is not so visible as you mentioned before, what's the challenge to correctly diagnose the IBD pressure when we're talking about subclinical disease?
I think that's the side of Gumboro virus that I think is most underestimated, that if you have a situation in which the infection is not visible, and that depends on MDAs, which virus is, it might be a variant, it might be a partial protection by the vaccination, but not yet complete. In that case, you don't get sick birds. So to take samples at the right time to be able to find the virus and type it, you don't know when to sample. So the best approach in this occasion is to take, let's say, bursa samples every week. Let's say at 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 birds. You could even send them right away to the laboratory to see is there Gumboro virus in these samples or not. You could also save some money and say, okay, I collect the bursa based on what I see and how the flock is performing. And you still have them in your freezer, but then if you think, hey, wait a minute, the flock was again not well performing, I had more coli or more contaminations, or the feed conversion was not good. Get the bursa out of the freezer, send them to the laboratory, and then because you sampled every week, you will be able to find the virus.
I have some publications about more different variants that's appearing in different parts of the globe. So what do you see as a connection with problems in the field, or what your opinion about this detection of new variants?
The variants, we have the classical like strains, and the variants, let's say from the Delawares to the strains that are very common in the US. We find them also more often in other parts of the world. That's one. The other one is the reassortment viruses. Let's say they have the outside is from the very virulent virus usually, but another part of the gene is from more attenuated strains. And these strains are quite often also not, the pathogenicity is relatively low. At least the birds don't get sick, but the bursa is heavily damaged. So with these two, let's say the American-like strains and the reassortments, which have the outside of the virus is the old-fashioned virus, but the inside is making it less, the mortality will be lower. These strains are easily underestimated because you don't get sick birds. So people underestimate the importance of a good vaccination program, they underestimate the prevalence of the virus, they underestimate immune suppression. So damage goes up. But people don't recognize that the real source of the problems might be the Gumboro infection.
Considering all this, what would be the key points for Gumboro control?
The key point for me is, please use an active surveillance or monitoring system. So do not wait until there are problems and then go, hey, could Gumboro virus be involved? No, Gumboro virus is a very resistant virus. It's in any country in the world, sometimes more, sometimes less. It's very difficult to get out of your house. It's a resistant virus. So this risk is always there. So for me, checking the take of vaccines, and do the birds respond to the vaccination program as I think they should be. Use serology also to measure the immune suppression the field pressure. And if there are any signs of Gumboro, please go for the virus. So in an active way, don't wait until it's too late, but do it even when things go well. Stay on top of it to prevent problems instead of running behind the problems.
And to close our really nice conversation today, any special advice for the vets when the topic is controlling the disease?
I think the vets are they have the knowledge and hopefully the tools to have this active monitoring to be of the utmost value to the company. Because if you can prevent damage by Gumboro, that's saving money. And that's in the end, it's better for the health of the chicken, welfare, environment, antibiotic use. So it's an excellent opportunity to show the value of being doing your job as a vet in the best possible way.
If that, I thank you for sharing your knowledge or experience with us. I think it was a really valuable conversation today. Receiving this advice from my point of view, one of the reference for the poultry industry. That's you in this really special episode, Jack. And I would like to thank you to watch us and keep turning with us. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode. And do not hesitate to give us your feedback by commenting down below in the comment section. Goodbye, stay safe.